Since the early 2000s, a few years before it ever premiered on Toonami, I have been a massive fan of the samurai shonen anime series known as Rurouni Kenshin. I first found Kenshin, believe it or not, at my local library where they had a section where you could rent VHS tapes. And for those of you that are too young, VHS is a medium in which you used to watch movies, and if you wanted to watch something you've never seen before, you'd have to actually go buy or rent it. For whatever reason, the library had the first VHS tape of the English dub of Rurouni Kenshin, featuring the first 4 episodes. I believe at the time I had seen very few anime, probably mostly just Dragon Ball Z and Pokemon. But it looked cool, so I rented it, and ever since, and to this day, I am a massive fan of the wandering swordsman known as Kenshin. It wasn't long before I was seeking out and collecting the entire series, but then something weird happened. After the end of the second season and arc, which is the pinnacle of where the show is and could be, there is a massive decline in quality and storytelling. The arcs were short and kind of all over the place, and many times it didn't feel like the same creative and intricate writing as I had seen before. Well, I came to find out that the final season of Rurouni Kenshin was, in its entirety, filler. And what is filler? Well, more often than not, when it comes to anime, they are adapting from the source material of the manga, but drawing and producing manga takes a lot of time, so sometimes the anime catches up to the story too fast for the manga to produce new chapters. So, as not to just end the anime, they will add in filler episodes written by the anime staff that don't come directly from the manga, to give more time for the manga to release. And a lot of the times I like filler. Dragon Ball Z, for instance, is ridiculed for some of its filler, but I think a lot of it is great and fleshes out the characters and world more so than the manga does. Also, the Garlic Jr. saga is awesome, no fucks given. But with Rurouni Kenshin, it wasn't just a few episodes of filler, but an entire season, and then it was just over. But why? And how is the series supposed to end? I needed to know. So when I got my first job when I was 16 years old, I spent part of my first paycheck on the first manga I ever owned, Rurouni Kenshin, Volume 18, which is at the end of the Kyoto arc and begins the arc which was never animated. And each paycheck, I bought another volume until I finally properly finished the series. And oh my god, I loved it. This arc is brilliant and has so much just finality to it. It feels like the natural progression of the first 2 seasons of the anime and fits in so well building towards a conclusion. Everything comes together, characters finish their evolution, and it ends just so well. Now, this video is not going to be a review or analysis of the Jinchu arc. I'll save that for another time. This video is going to be about Rurouni Kenshin the anime, and why the hell the final third of the series was never animated, and what a shame that is, and why it still, after all these years, deserves to be animated. Simply put, from what research I've done, and I gotta say there is very, very little official information of this out there. Tons of fan theories and speculation, but not much from actual sources. Seriously, most of the sources just seem to go back to message boards from like 2003. I kinda miss those days. But anyway, during the run of the 3rd season of the anime, which was all filler and new material written by the anime staff, it apparently did so poorly that its ratings went down to the point where it was cancelled before a 4th season could ever be made. The final season ended in Japan in September of 1998. The manga at this point was still only about halfway through the Jinchu arc, so even if the 4th season was to be made, it seems unlikely that they'd be able to complete it. And so the anime was over, and that seemed like that was it. But as far as I can tell, the anime staff was always planning on continuing the manga again once they could. There's some images that have been floating around online forever of the main antagonist of the arc, Enishi, drawn in the style of the anime series alongside Kenshin. I can't confirm any of the drawings to be official, but I remember seeing them when I was younger, just hoping and praying that maybe someday they'd get back to it. You can also see a brief anime version of Tomo, another character from this arc, in the end credits of the 3rd season, even though she was never actually in the season itself. The Jinchu arc would have featured so many things that Kenshin had been building to, not the least of which is including Kenshin's full backstory and what led him to give up killing and become a wanderer, but also a full circle resolution involving having ties into that history, ones which come back to haunt Kenshin in a much more personal way than the Kyoto arc did. The similarities between the 2 arcs pretty much begin and end with someone directly involved with Kenshin's past comes back to be a villain in modern day. But as Shishio had a vendetta against the Japanese government that betrayed him, and him battling Kenshin really was just a detour in his plan, the enemy in the Jinchu arc, Enishi, has a direct emotional connection to Kenshin, and there is here specifically to make Kenshin suffer. It delves into what violence and murder truly means in the mind of our main character, and how to finally break a man who lives his life for others. No other character has ever come close to breaking down Kenshin's theology and emotional state as Enishi does, and it winds up disbanding just about all of the main characters as well. But we never got any of that. Instead, the filler arc involves some strange religious-based group of episodes that tries to say something profound but kind of falls flat on its face, and then something about feng shui, and honestly by that point I was mostly tuned out. So instead of ending with the explosion of emotional action that is the Jinchu arc, the anime ends on a fizzle and a whimper, with only the final episode of the series being the only redeeming episode of that season, and it's still pretty underwhelming. Rurouni Kenshin did still continue in anime form, though. There was a movie released in Japan in 1997 before the series had officially ended, but once again this is not connected to the story of the manga at all, and was just there to kind of exist. There's a few good sequences, but overall it's pretty forgettable. But then we have this, the OVAs, and this is a unique and cool little thing on its own. Known in the US as Samurai X Trust and Betrayal, always a little confusing, but the company that acquired the rights to the Rurouni Kenshin series, Media Blasters, did not get the rights to the movie and the OVAs. Those were later picked up by ADV Films, who decided to rebrand the name Rurouni Kenshin to Samurai X. One reason would probably be a rights issue with the name Rurouni Kenshin being owned by another company, but that's just my theory. But also around the same time that this came out, it was a very common thing for the US to rename foreign films and shows. I remember being so confused as a kid, being really into martial arts films and going to the video store and seeing Jet Li movies called The Defender or The Enforcer, which wasn't even close to the Chinese titles and usually had nothing to do with the movies at all. It was just a rebranding to hope sell better to the American audience, and it's pretty much the same idea with Samurai X. It's not a bad sounding title, but Kenshin isn't actually a samurai to begin with, and X, I guess, refers to his scar, but it doesn't matter. It just makes things more confusing. But it also always annoyed me when I was younger due to the different companies it had different voice actors. But I digress. It's the best thing that we got missing out of the third arc of the manga. And it's only a tiny piece of the puzzle. Essentially, this 4-episode miniseries tells the backstory of Kenshin and him being an assassin, the Batosai, and how he got his cross-shaped scar, and why he gave up being a manslayer. In the final arc of the manga, it deals heavily with Kenshin's past and characters from it, and there's a point in the story where Kenshin finally broke his silence to his friends and tells them this story. It takes up a couple of volumes and is needed for context of the entire arc, but also gives us a real look at the man Kenshin was. The 4-episode OVA stands alone as just the backstory, but it also makes the artistic choice to take itself deadly seriously. And as a standalone thing, this works brilliantly. The tone of the manga and anime series can get dark and deeply psychological, but it also has a fantastical element to it and bounces back with humor throughout. The OVA has a dark, somber atmosphere almost the entire way through, and it really works to its benefit, showing the weight on this character's shoulders. The animation is also much more realistic, as are the action sequences. They even combine some real-world backgrounds with the animation, and it blends fantastically. Now, I love this OVA, and I think it even works really well if you've never seen anything Kenshin related. It works very well on its own. The only disappointment is the fact that it just stops and we don't get to the present day conclusion of the effects these events would have on Kenshin. Jump to 2001 and there's a second OVA released of Rurouni Kenshin, this time only 2 episodes long. In the US it was once again rebranded as Samurai X Reflections, and this one is, well, I mean, it tries, I guess. This one takes place far into the future after the manga or anime ends, and it's unclear if this is meant to be canon to either. It was not written by the manga author, so one would think it's not canon. But what is this connected to? Is this the second ending to the anime series? What is it? I don't know. But there's barely a story here, and the first episode is mostly just flashbacks to things that happen in the anime and manga, full scenes done again, just reanimated in a style similar to the first OAV, keeping the serious tone with a slightly less bleak atmosphere to it. But then we basically just get a blue balls tease of the Jinchu arc added in the second episode, cutting out everything except one plot point of the whole arc. And as she shows up and kidnaps Kaoru, taking her to an island where Kenshin shows up to rescue her. Except in the manga, and spoiler alert, Enishi has multiple teammates all with vendettas against Kenshin, and also when he attacks Kaoru, instead of just kidnapping her, he creates a lifelike body of her, looking like it was stabbed in the heart, making Kenshin think she was dead. Not because Enishi actually wanted to kill her, but because he just simply wants Kenshin to suffer. So Kenshin wraps a chain around his sword and goes into exile, depressed and broken, ready to sit alone for the rest of his life, and chooses not even to respond to his friends, who all get disbanded at this point and have their own adventures and development, until they finally all come together again and learn Kaoru is alive on the island and all go together to get her and have an amazing final confrontation with Enishi. And it's amazing! There's so much to it, and it's just such a good storytelling, but in the OVA, we just get a basic small portion of it, cutting out all of the build-up and drama. I mean, I should just be happy that we get the Enishi character, but it feels so detached. It's not actually connected to the anime series, and it cuts out almost everything. And if anything, I guess it can work as a little sequel to the first OVA, but this still is not what it needed to be to complete the manga in anime form. Rurouni Kenshin would not return again to anime until 2011 with a god-awful retelling of the Kyoto arc that just condenses, changes, and bastardizes the best arc in the manga and anime, and isn't even worth talking about. But what I can say is that Rurouni Kenshin is still relatively popular. A live-action trilogy of movies has come out and have all done pretty well at the box office. Also, they covered the first two arcs of the anime and did announce that 2 more live-action movies are coming, which will most likely cover the Jinchu arc and end the live-action series. And it will be really cool to see the Jinchu arc in live-action, and I'd be stoked to watch it. But if Kenshin is still thriving in the year 2020, and the manga author, after some controversy I won't talk about in this video, has even returned to the character in manga form in recent years, telling brief continuations and Elseworld type stuff in stories, why have we still not gotten a full Jinchu arc animated? I understand it's been so long now the animation wouldn't look like the 90s series and things would be changed, but if we could at least get the same voice actors and attempt at that style to make it feel like it was in canon, it would be a dream come true for Kenshin fans. If some studio could just pick up Kenshin for a single season, or maybe 2, and just finish adapting the manga properly. I don't know if it will ever happen or who even holds the current rights for an anime adaptation, and we may never see it. And as it's been 20 years, the future seems dim. But with Kenshin still holding on in the hearts of many and new material being consistently made every couple of years, maybe we will get a resurgence in the anime. Hell, even if they went back to the beginning and decided to do a new series from the beginning, I'd be okay with that. The original 90s anime will always be important to me and is my number 3 favorite anime of all time, even with the missing final arc. And as much as I'd love to see the Jinchu arc continued in that style, maybe what's right for Kenshin right now is a complete reboot from the beginning. So tell me what you guys think. Are you a fan of Kenshin? And if you've made it this far in the video, I imagine you are. How badly do you want to see the Jinchu arc animated, and would you like to see it be a continuation of the 90s anime, a standalone OVA, or included in a complete reboot? Let me know your thoughts down below, because I'd love to hear them. Please like this video if you would, subscribe if you want to, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video.